Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Join hosts Dan Melnick and Qasim Masood as they explore big ideas, limitless possibilities, and engage with visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who dare to dream big, get inspired, motivated, and find practical tips for personal growth. Think big, dream bigger, and ignite your potential.
Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim, and our guest today is Jeremy Dean. So, Jeremy, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us where you live and what you do.
Well, that's a very paralyzing question. Jeremy Dean. We're based in New Zealand. So some of the people watching or listening will know where New Zealand is, down the bottom of the earth. We're pretty well known for rugby and maybe Lord of the Rings and a few other those stereotypical things. But strangely, I started a business that helps organizations, individuals and teams harness their emotions to drive performance. And we kicked it off about 8 years ago, and I've ever since stumbling across some research about emotions at work, which is a highly controversial and taboo subject in most organizations or within most teams. Since stumbling across some incredible research over about 20 years in this space, I've been obsessed with how emotions drive behavior and impact performance, culture, customer experience, well-being, essentially anything, really, to be honest. Emotions drive most things, yet we don't talk about them, we don't know how, and we don't have permission. And so I design games to help give people permission to talk about how they feel.
Awesome. So I love that. And it's a very niche thing that you do. So I'm curious, kind of, how did you get into this?
Yeah, it's super niche. And in a market like New Zealand, where we first started, which is very small, it's kind of counterintuitive to go so niche because we celebrate generalists here more than we do specialists. Fortunately, the world's a big place. So there's hundreds of thousands, if not millions of people who are interested in emotions in that niche around the world. But I was professionally playing sport before let's call it my first corporate career. And I suffered really hugely from performance anxiety and was a part of some really terrible team culture in a couple of different teams. And when I moved into my corporate world, that sort of stuck with me, especially the performance anxiety. And I was trying to learn my way in brand strategy and culture design, and it was very complicated. I'd come from a sporting background. I was trying to simplify things, and I'd stumbled across some really beautiful tools, but one in particular called the brand deck, which is a deck of cards that helps you identify who you are and who you're not. A really simple, structured card sorting activity. And I love that concept. And I thought, I wonder how I could apply that to customer experience, because customer experience is ultimately is all about how you feel or how you want your customers to feel. And so imagine if we could create a conversation where you could define the things you wanted your customers to feel and the things you didn't want them to feel, and create a team conversation around that, and then design experiences to elicit the positive emotions, help manage the undesired or negative emotions. And so I just got obsessed with creating these really simple card structures for important conversations around emotions. And then in 2016, I saw an HBR article called Manage Your Emotional Culture by Sigal Bassard and Olivia O'Neill at Wharton and George Mason universities in the States. And there was a line in that article which said, most organizations don't care how their people are feeling or should be feeling at work. They care more about the stated set of behaviors or the cognitive culture, how people think about their work. And I was like, well, I've been in so many teams where the manager or the coach or the team leader didn't care at all about how we were feeling. They just want us to do our jobs, hit our targets, perform, but not understanding that emotions drive us as human beings and our ability to do those things. And so I then started our second game called the Emotional Culture Deck, which is a conversation about what we want our people to feel and not feel to be successful at work. But it applies to home life, to schools, education, sporting teams. We've used it in every single industry you could ever imagine. With every human being you think might not use it, SAS soldiers, retired athletes, current athletes, teachers, educators, scientists, everybody has emotions, but we don't know how to talk about them. And we try to make that possible and then understand each other, create connection.
That makes sense. So I guess in terms of cards, right? Because you sell the cards like on your website, Is it mostly B2B to people, buying through their organizations, or do you have like small business owners that buy the cards? What does that kind of look like for you?
It's kind of paralyzing for us, and probably not the way that you should grow a business, is that because it's for everybody, sometimes people think it's not for them. But we sell our tools, our games, to mum and dads who work for themselves, teachers, all the way through to Walt Disney, Netflix, Amazon, and every bit in between that. So individual operators of small businesses, teams of 5 to 30, large businesses, huge teams and big organizations, everywhere in between. Because the one common denominator between all of them is they have a leader who cares deeply about their people and they want to understand them better. So that's really inspired business owners, that's team leaders, that's teachers, that's sport coaches across the board. Yeah. But strangely also, we give our game away for free. I actually played, you might have seen that on our site. And one late night with my sister a long time ago, we were playing Cards Against Humanity, and she'd showed it to me for the first time, and I went on the website and saw that you could download the Cards Against Humanity for free. And I was like, wow, that's incredible, because this game is awesome. I really enjoyed it as a sort of a late night activity. And I was like, well, if they can do it, surely we can do it. Nobody knows who we are. And also at the same time, that will make it possible for people who might not trust what we're doing. They might not believe in it. It gives them a chance to test it out for themselves and go, wow, this is possible. And so we actually make it freely available as a PDF that you can get your scissors out and like cut up, make your own cards. It takes a long time, but it's possible. And so that means it ends up in some very, for me anyway, peculiar places that I'd never dreamed our cards would get to.
No, it's super cool. And it's awesome that, like, as you said, it can really be applicable for so many different use cases. So in terms of like marketing this product, how have you kind of done that? Because it seems like, you are selling here in the US, and I see it when I log in, it's in USD. So obviously it's, I'm sure, like a big market for you. But have you run ads? Have you just done cold outreach? How do you kind of like go out and talk to people about your games?
Nice. So we've sold into 78 countries, I think, around the world now.
Oh, wow.
We've got about 1,500 plus practitioners. So people were certified in our game in 47 countries now. So it's got its tentacles into far-reaching places from New Zealand. There's one driving principle for, let's call it our marketing, but for our whole business. And it's this idea of we want people to feel generous, and we give it away for free. But when somebody orders a game, we also put in a free pack into every order. So if you order 1, you get 2. If you order 2, you get 3. And then we ask people to share that extra deck with somebody that inspires them. And I've unashamedly stolen that idea from Seth Godin. Many people listening will know Seth Godin. If you don't, he's the GOAT in my mind of marketing and communication and storytelling. And I bought a book, one of his books. And now I don't remember the name of the book. And this is part of the story, really. I don't remember the name of the book, but I ordered 1 and 2 books turned up. And there was a note that said, please pass this on to somebody who inspired your leadership, because it was a leadership book. And I remember I gave that to my old boss. I remember when the pack turned up on my step. I remember where I was sitting when that happened. Still to this day, a flat in Mount Victoria in Wellington here. And I thought, wow, in my mind, that's the ultimate form of marketing. There's generosity in that. There's word of mouth. There's passing it forward. And so from day one, we followed that trait. And so we've given out more decks than we've probably sold because of that concept. But that allows some word of mouth, some connections that wouldn't exist. So that's a really important part that's driven a lot of the growth of our game, that between that and giving the game away for free as a download. We also have a certification system as part of our business, and a lot of that is also driven by sharing your reflections, your learning as you develop your practice, but sharing it not just inside our community, but also socially to create some social proof points. Because as you may have experienced when you first saw it, as somebody else might, if they go and look at the website, they might go, I'm not sure about this. But because we've got 1,500 practitioners certified in 40 countries and people sharing about it in their social networks, in their friend groups online, it's created this little ripple effect, which was way bigger than I ever imagined it was going to be, based on those 3 principles really when it comes to marketing. And that's not including some money investment we spend on digital marketing, but all of that pales in comparison to the organic word of mouth and the traffic from those activities itself.
Yeah, I mean, you guys have really good reviews across the board. And I guess, obviously, there's tons of different value that you offer to people. But in terms of like getting this in front of people, right? Because like you mentioned that, word of mouth has been big, having these conversations. But, in terms of meeting people, I mean, do you go to like, conferences here in the States or other events? Like, what has been like some of the other big channels of kind of getting this in front of as many people as possible?
Yeah, it sounds strange, right? But those 3 channels are the biggest channels for us by far. Because we're in New Zealand, it's not difficult. Obviously, anybody can travel the world, but I also have a young family, 3 babies under 3, which makes it wholly impossible to travel now. But originally our tour wasn't big, so people didn't know me and still don't really, to be honest, but at least not enough to get invited to international conferences. I'd run hundreds of workshops myself for years with the game. We also have our practitioners and our consultants. So 1,500 of them, they would have run upwards of 1,000 workshops. Okay. And if you think there's 20 or 30 people in each of those workshops, the level that creates for word of mouth for using the game just multiplies. So I've not been on a stage in a long time. Our community exists virtually online, and I teach our consultants and still train them. And so my work is strangely focused on empowering the people we train to be those people.
Okay.
I'm okay. I know my job is to be an evangelist of our tool, of our universe, of the game, of the impact we have. But at the same time, I still think my biggest impact at the moment can be training the people that I'm closest to help them have a big impact and then see that ripple effect.
But do you think that like the game, adds so much value virtually, because I think it's like, right, obviously that when you start, it was a very different world, and post-COVID, many companies, many organizations are virtual. It's a very common practice. So I'm curious if like you see the value, if it as much value for the game, or is it really something that adds the most value when you have a workshop and everybody's like in the same place?
Yeah, such a great question. When COVID hit in New Zealand and we got really isolated, like cut off from the rest of the world, we saw a big impact immediately. Obviously, our game is it's tangible, it's tactical. You play the cards. During a pandemic, touching stuff is not ideal. And people couldn't because they were isolated from each other. And so we actually had people inside our community design ways to use the game virtually. We had our own customers, our own community members designing solutions to the problem of having physical cards and not being able to be face-to-face. And so there's 2 or 3 different ways that we now are able to offer virtual uses of the game via digital tools like Miro or purely screen sharing in Zoom. There's some really interesting and powerful ways to put cards on a screen and then give people post-it notes to still create. In our world, we call it a 3-point conversation, which is I'm transferring my emotion to the card. That's what makes it possible to talk about emotions with our tool. So yeah, in a really beautiful way, our community is designing problems to their solutions to their problems that we can't do fast enough as quick as they can at the moment. And so the list of inspiration I've got from our community on ways to design digital tools for this eventually is so long, but paralyzing because of the amount of investment it's going to take and the time. But certainly it is best to have the physical cards, but we have seen incredible impact at a professional level, but personal level of people using it in a virtual world still. So it is possible. It's just not the ideal way that I designed it. And the impact when you have the cards in person is really profound, but it can still be really profound without it.
That makes sense. So obviously now we're in Q1 of 2025. So we still have a lot of the year left to go. So I'm curious, in terms of your business, what are some of the biggest goals and objectives that you have for the rest of this year?
Nice. This is not part of your question, but I'm going to share it because it's on my mind at the moment and it has been a point of focus to start the year. But our really ambitious, over-the-top, crazy one, which is driving me, is we want to be the world's most widely used culture tool, because every organization has the potential to be impacted by this game. It works across leadership, change, culture, stakeholder experience, conflict, all of that. And so I think, it's going to take us a while to get there, but that's my long-term vision, is how do we become the most widely used tool on the planet for culture building? Yeah, to do that though, we have to build this really strong, connected, inspired community of practice where there's thousands and thousands of people out in the world using our tools to help rehumanize the conversations that workplaces are happening. And so we've been going through designing a new certification pathway, new courses. We started with 1 course, online course. We've now got 4 of them for different specialties. And so we're rolling those new courses out over the period of this year. We're running an online cohort course every 5 weeks at the moment, training people in different ways to use the game. And so just executing on those things so we can train more people to go into workplaces to have these conversations, but also help those individuals grow their own businesses and own practice. Because if you're a coach or a consultant, you might be looking for tools to add to your toolbox.
Right.
So you can use it with clients, and that ultimately helps our growth, our game and our mission, but also helps individual business owners and consultants and coaches find new revenue and have an impact on their clients.
That's awesome. So obviously you've been doing this for some time. So if you could go back in time before you got started, what is the one biggest piece of advice that you wish you knew?
It's such a good question. And I ask this question all the time of our community members who are going through our certified pathways. If they look back after 60 workshops, what advice do they wish they gave themselves at the start? And often it's about imposter syndrome and wishing that, and saying, I should have had more confidence just to try it. And I was considering this the other day. I didn't know you were going to ask this question, but I was thinking about it myself the other day. And I was actually like, my imposter syndrome, although it's been challenging, has actually helped me, because I've had to start small and try a bunch of things and work really fast. And so that's been a good thing. But if I was going to do anything differently, what would it be? And I honestly don't know that. I don't think there's anything I do differently right now. The mistakes I've made have helped us get to here. We wouldn't be here right now if I hadn't made some of the mistakes early with our certification system or our courses. If I was giving advice to somebody who's starting though, not myself, I would say you have to lead with generosity. In the world that we're in, where you're trying to design card games and tools, it's so impossible. People shouldn't really follow what we're trying to do because it's 10 years just to get to here. How do you convince people to buy a card game that helps you talk about your emotions? It's like the ultimate Everest challenge. I would say you've got to lead with generosity. Don't guard your ideas, because you want your ideas to spread, and you can only spread your ideas if you're generous with them.
Yeah, that's really good advice. So if somebody watching this wanted to buy the card game and wanted to reach out to you directly, what's the best way for somebody to find your business and or get in contact with you?
Nice. Strangely, I'd say just Google the emotional culture deck, because not only will you find our site almost at the top, but you also see hundreds of pages of people using our game, proof points that will help give you confidence that it's going to work. Because I realize that's a big barrier, is like, is it going to work? So Google us first, because you'll see some incredible stuff out there that people have written about what we're doing. But you can find us at ridersandelephants.com. And on that homepage, you'll be able to download each of our games. We have 3 games. We have the emotional culture deck, we have the customer experience deck, and we have the well-being deck. And we're in development at the moment of the reputation deck, how you want to be remembered and your presence. And so you can go on the website, you can download all of those games for free, check them out, explore the community, learn a bunch of ways that other people are using it, but also we're just sharing as many activities as we can. There's 130 different ways to use the game now, and we're pretty generous and open with helping people understand a lot of those different ways, so people can go, oh, that works for me, or it doesn't.
Awesome. Well, Jeremy, it was a pleasure having you on, and thanks so much for your time today.
Awesome, Dan. Well, thanks very much for reaching out and helping spread our word about the work we're doing.
Of course.